Time now for Morning Rounds with CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. Jon LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Tara Narula. First up, safety for sleeping babies. This week, the American Academy of Pediatrics released updated recommendations for ensuring safe sleeping environments for infants. The CDC says every year, about 3,500 babies die suddenly and unexpectedly, and about 1,500 of these result from SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Infant sleep safety is vital to reducing the risk of these deaths. Tara, what are some of the key points when it comes to putting infants to sleep?
So key points in this recommendation was to reinforce what we already knew, which is that we should be putting our infants down on a firm, flat surface on their back. In addition, there shouldn't be any soft bedding, pillows, toys, bumpers in the crib, and you really should avoid overheating the baby by kind of covering their head or bundling them up very warmly or tightly. But what's really new was this recommendation that the baby should be in the same room with their parents. Room sharing, not bed sharing. And that room sharing should really last anywhere from 6 months up to a year. And that has been shown to reduce SIDS by about 50%, with the idea being that possibly you're more likely to feed, monitor, and comfort the baby if the baby's in the room with you.
You were just closer there. I mean, you mentioned something new. John, are there other things that maybe in these recommendations may surprise people?
Well, Tara mentioned feeding, and I think some people may find it surprising that breastfeeding is actually linked to a lower risk of SIDS or of unexpected death in an infant. And when you think about it, it kind of does make sense. There are things in, we talked about the Tasmanian devil, about that there was stuff in the breast milk that is protective. Well, there's stuff in human breast milk that is also protective, prevents infections, and maybe that somehow is playing a role. But I do want to add that for women who are unable to breastfeed or they choose not to breastfeed, that they shouldn't feel guilty about this. This is one, they say this is one of a number of things that can be done. And so, you know, it's an infinite possibility of women and people in general feeling guilty about things they've done or haven't done. And so I wouldn't want this to be an added pressure. If they can do it, the recommendation is to try to do it.
Tara, many people, even if it's just by accident, you know, fall asleep, you know, while feeding or lying with their child. So, I mean, what do you keep in mind in this case? One
of the nice things about this recommendation is that it was exactly that realistic about what happens to us in the middle of the night, which is a bad form of torture when you're sleep deprived with an infant.
Yes.
I know it firsthand. And
I remember it well.
Yes. The recommendation is that if you are going to take your baby and feed them in the middle of the night, it's preferable to do it in your room, in your bed, and make your bed as safe as possible. Remove pillows, comforters, so that if you do fall asleep, the baby's there with you, as opposed to an armchair or a sofa where they could get wedged between the cushions or overlaid by you and your body. And then if and when you wake up, you should take the baby from your bed and put them back in their own crib or bassinet. That really is the safest way.
Yeah, of that falling asleep section there when they're in bed with you. My brother is a new father and has dealt with all of this. We're going to move on now and talk about the growing push for legal recreational marijuana. It's been 4 years since Colorado and Washington state legalized recreational marijuana. Since then, 2 other states and the District of Columbia have joined. November 8th, voters in 5 more states will decide if they want to follow suit. Dr. LaPook took a look at this evolving issue for tomorrow night's edition of 60 Minutes. Here's a preview.
There's huge differences between alcohol and marijuana, and that's one of the things the public really needs to understand, is they think, well, we can take all the rules and everything we've set up for alcohol and just transfer them over, and they can't do that.
Dr. Marilyn Hustis, former chief of chemistry and drug metabolism at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, has been studying marijuana's effects on the human body for more than 25 years.
When you take alcohol, it has its effects and then it leaves the body. When you take cannabis, it gets into the tissues of your body and is stored.
It can be stored in the fat.
It's stored in the fat.
How about in the brain?
And the brain is a very fatty tissue. And so we know that it's still in the brain when you can no longer measure it in the blood.
Colorado law says anyone with 5 nanograms per milliliter or more of THC in their blood can be arrested for driving while impaired. But by the time a police officer gets a suspect back to the station and tests their blood, the marijuana can be out of their bloodstream. Roadside oral swab tests for marijuana are now being evaluated by Colorado police. So far, Colorado has not seen a huge spike in marijuana abuse by teens or in driving while high. But the data is still being collected on pot's overall impact on the state.
John, we were talking earlier, there are already more than 20 states that have some form of legalized marijuana. More could join them in November. So what challenges are these states facing?
Well, that's exactly why we went to Colorado at 60 Minutes, because Colorado has the most experiences, more than anybody else in the country, with the legal weed business. And it's not so intuitively obvious. You know, I spoke to Governor Hickenlooper, and he said, if it's going to be legalized, you know, and it does look like it's going more and more that way, then you need to figure out how to introduce it into society in a way that's responsible. You know, what are the guardrails here so we don't go off the tracks in terms of kids using more marijuana in babies, car accident, driving. You know, there's no equivalent of the breathalyzer, which there is for alcohol, in terms of figuring out whether you're driving while stoned.
Tara, given all of the unknowns about marijuana and health, what kind of research, if any, is the government doing to get some answers on this?
So research outside of the government has been challenging because it is a Schedule I drug, and up until August, the only place you could get weed from was a specific place in Mississippi, University of Mississippi. That being said, the government itself does perform research on marijuana. The NIH in 2015 spent over $100 million on marijuana research and cannabinoid research. Some of the things that they study include things like trends in marijuana use, effects of marijuana on the brain and development of both adolescents, as well as prenatal exposure. They look at potential therapeutic uses of marijuana on pain, on things like HIV, cannabinoid use disorder. So there is a portfolio of research that the government is doing when it comes to marijuana.
And I should add that there are some good things coming out of legalization too. Many fewer people are being arrested, and you know all the things that leads to and for the rest of your life after you've been arrested. So it's a really nuanced, very tricky issue.
Yeah, something that's been around for so long with so much more to explore.
Watch 60 Minutes.
Yeah, well, this is a reminder. You can see all of John's report on legalizing recreational marijuana tomorrow night on 60 Minutes.